Hi, James.
Hi, Keith. How's
It's
it going?
lovely to see you after some time, after a long time, actually. Wonderful to welcome you back to the University of Lincoln, and thank you for coming. So, all of you who have joined us today, I'm delighted to welcome James Cohen. James was with us till 2016, and he's been with us as an undergraduate student of business and finance. And then he joined the MSc in finance and then left us in 2016 and then started his illustrious career in finance. So that's and I remember him always as a twinkling, happy person. And it was delightful to be teaching him. So it's so nice to see you again, James, and thank you for coming. And tell us a little bit about the role of the degrees which you did in Lincoln, because we have an audience who's listening in, and hopefully you can enlighten them about various things.
Oh, thank you very much. And yeah, it's lovely to come back virtually or as best as we can. Yeah, so I did business and finance undergraduate, and then I went on to do the MSc finance. After that, I went to work as an operations analyst for a hedge fund back home in Cambridge, and really the degrees kind of set me up to go in with a working knowledge. When you go into that sort of environment, you're required to understand, from the basics of what do hedge funds do and what do hedge funds trade, down to more intricate stuff like some of the bond pricing we use, things like that, and that sort of all that information combined gives you a great understanding, and that really helped me when I cracked on into that career.
Okay, excellent. So your career kick-started with Cambridge. Wasn't it Cantab Capital, isn't it? And we can find you
Yeah.
on LinkedIn if anybody wants to find you there. So that was wonderful. And I remember you finished you were actually finishing off your degree when you applied for the job, wasn't that correct? And then you got this job opportunity, which was great, and you went back to the fold. So I think everybody would like to know a little bit more about your career and the types of finance, and there's a variety of people hopefully listening in today. So tell us a little bit about it, and there might be people from undergraduate courses who are thinking of finance, people who are thinking, what does it comprise of? What is a hedge fund, for God's sake? What is a bond? So go on and tell us all about it.
Yeah, of course. So I went to work for Cantab Capital Partners as an operations analyst in a post-degree role. So it wasn't specific to having a master's. You could go in there after a bachelor's degree, but for me, it came just after doing the master's. And what you do as an operations analyst to begin with is you're kind of on the day-to-day sort of what we call trade matching and sort of balancing all the risk and things like that. So you're doing very much introductory work to begin with, and then as you kind of get used to it, you then start taking on more of the project sort of stuff. So projects could be launching funds, which, as you said, some of you might not know what they are. What a fund is and what a hedge fund is and what Cantab Capital is there's a group of people have come up with a way to invest that they think is the best way to invest. And what they'll do is they'll structure all of this in what's called a fund. They'll go out to all these very successful investors, these rich institutions. So it could be a big pension fund. It could be a very wealthy person. So they could, for instance, be a founder of Microsoft. And what they'll do is they'll provide capital, which is money, and they'll give this fund money to invest. And with a hedge fund, what you can do is you can invest in pretty much anything that you want. So we traded everything from normal stocks and shares to these things called credit default swaps, which some people may know, some people may not know, but they become sort of funkier and more interesting and what's called very exotic. And
And riskier.
pardon?
And riskier.
And riskier, yes, and that's that's part of it. I could talk a little bit, I could talk for days about how sort of the riskier it is. These hedge funds are sort of trying to go into that because you have crowded out marketplaces and things like that. And as an operations analyst, what you do is you kind of sit underneath that trade. So let's say a portfolio manager has decided they want some credit default swaps. They'll then go out and buy them through any mechanism, whether that's through a trader or through a trading system. And then it's up to us in the operations team to make sure that happens, and that happens the way that we expect. And that's there's a lot that can go wrong when you're taking into account all the different counterparties, all the different mechanisms by which people can do it. And so your job is to understand what the product is and understand the ways in which it can go wrong and go right. And then you kind of mitigate the risk, as we would say. You mitigate the risk of a failed trade or something not happening, something not working.
Right. So you're not only investing on behalf of your clients who are putting their money with you, but you're also making sure that things don't go wrong or belly up for the firm as well.
And yeah. So that's actually a good point. I'm not sure I've explained that as well as I could have. Yeah. So there are different teams and different functions within that to make sure it works out. So a hedge fund manager would have multiple departments. So you have the sort of the analysis department and the PM, the portfolio management department, that would say, oh, I think Amazon is a great stock right now, so I'm going to go and buy that. And then they'll have the support functions around them to make sure that happens and to take as much of the burden of worrying about whether everything's in line away from them. And then operations sort of sits into that role, where we make sure that everything that they want is there the way that they want it. Some firms will have a trading desk who would sort of, what they would do is the traders would trade it and then they'd pass it on to the operations team to kind of deal with it. Sometimes, so it wasn't for us, but some operations teams will go out and execute some of the trades for people. For us, it was more mitigating the kind of the risk, because what I worked for was called a quantitative hedge fund, where they hire PhDs to bring in statistical data to understand it and to trade. So we had 3,000 stocks in one of our portfolios. And so the traders focus on just trading it. We focus on just making sure it's there, right, and that we've covered any kind of cash requirements.
Right. So that's quite that's a very neat way of putting up all the complex little bits which go on in this. When you're dealing with a lot of money, you must have all these kind of specialists which are there. So, would you like to tell us, audience, a little bit about the other types of careers in finance which can come along, or elaborate a bit, because we have people possibly listening and thinking, where do I start? What's this world about? So I think you've had some familiarity about it. And if I remember, you actually went on after Cantab to do something else. You became you were promoted. So maybe you could incorporate a little bit more about it in your talk.
Yeah, of course. So yes, I was made operations manager. So I was made operations manager. So that role, you kind of, in finance, sometimes when you get promoted, you kind of step away slightly from the day-to-day stuff, and you look after more of the project work. And in the world of hedge funds, regulation is constantly changing, and your role is to then try and prepare for that. So you're trying to make sure that the workload on the day-to-day works fine, and that you've got the pipelines of the future working okay. So you kind of use both skill sets to try and manage, if that makes sense. I can talk about the different careers within hedge funds, and then how sort of hedge funds slot in and the different careers that they kind of face off to. So as we discussed, you have research. So that can go in two forms. You can have quantitative and discretionary. Quantitative is more for, I'd say, people who've studied maths, physics, PhD sort of stuff. But then you do get discretionary, which is more looking at perhaps the fundamentals of a stock, trying to understand the market, which I think is more kind of business of finance related, economics, that sort of thing. Within discretionary, you also have what's called the macro environment, which would be interest rates, for instance, foreign exchange. And so you can have careers in that. And I think that's probably one of the more coveted routes. And for those sort of interested in that, that would be the typical CFA route, might be to try and angle yourself into one of those kind of analysis roles. Because later down the line, what you would want to do is you'd want to become a portfolio manager, where you have risk allocated, which is just someone is willing to give you money, and you have a mandate to go out and invest. What you then have on the discretionary side is the traders. So we kind of think of traders as people who have two phones on, shouting at people, trying to get, make money as high as possible, ringing a bell. That whole world is changing. But what you do sometimes get are risk-taking traders. So they might be allocated, they're kind of a hybrid portfolio manager / trader who get allocated risk to go and trade. It might be shorter term, but they have these expertise that they've developed perhaps over 10 years at Goldman Sachs or one of these banks. You then have something called execution traders, which is something more of a graduate role, and that's something that people might want to look at if they're interested in becoming a trader, where they'll sit next to a portfolio or they'll sit next to a quant, and what they'll do is they'll be told what to trade. Now their focus is more understanding the timing of these executions. What algorithms do I want to use to have what's called minimum touch, because you don't want to have too big an impact on the marketplace when you make these trades. So what these people become experts in is actually going out and doing the purchase or the sell. They're sort of experts in that acquisition. From there, you then have operations, which we sort of discussed, where you kind of worry about everything that's going on after that point. And then next to us, you have the finance team, so the finance function. And what they'll do is they'll look at all of the positions that we've got, and they'll try and basically run their accounting rules and models to make sure that they can accurately price it. Because what a lot of funds will do is they'll have day-to-day trading for investors. So they need to make sure that all the numbers tie up, so that when they go out the next morning to tell their investors what their portfolio is worth, that they have the correct amount. And to do that, you would need your ACA. That's actually a really important function. It's the one that I think people get concerned with the most, because if you mess up that process, people can end up in lawsuits. It's quite a risky but rewarding role. From there, you have something called the marketing team. It works just like a business. That's the role where what they'll do is they'll go out and they'll just try and raise money. And it's a really interesting concept in the world of hedge funds, how you raise money, because you're not allowed to go out to the average Joe on the street. These have to be intelligent investors, they call them. So these are people who can afford to lose money, because hedge funds can take risky strategies. So it could be, again, let's say you've put all your money into credit default swaps and it goes wrong, you could lose all of that.
Yeah.
So they have to be able to market that correctly. So it's not picking up the phone. It's not Wolf of Wall Street style. It's far more, I wouldn't say it's far more elegant, where they'll talk to investors over time. They'll sit down with them in meetings and they'll talk them through all the strategies. So you get to kind of face off with that. They'll do all of the introductions to the portfolio managers, and then they'll keep this book of people who are interested, not interested. Maybe they'll meet them down, not down a pub, but sort of in a conference room over some tequila or something like that, and they'll try and talk to them, but you've got to be a little bit careful about going too strong.
So that's a mix of marketing skills as well as finance skills.
Yes, it's actually, yeah, it's really a lot of them will do their CFA as well, because on the other side of a hedge fund, what you'll have is you have allocators. And these are smart people who know what they're doing, who've been given money by a big institution. And what they'll do is they'll pick a portfolio of funds. So you have what's called a fund of fund or a fund of hedge funds.
Yeah.
And their job is to really investigate everything. In fact, they'll even talk to us on the operational side to make sure that the business is working smoothly, that we have the best practice. And they'll also make sure that all of the strategies line up. And so the marketing people have to be able to talk in depth about these strategies, so that they're not having the portfolio manager always coming in, trying to talk about all of their strategies, taking time away from actually investing.
Yeah, it strikes me that there's a lot of teamwork going on. I would have thought sometimes that, when you talk of finance, somebody's just sitting there at a desk and doing what they have to do. But from what you're describing, it sounds incredibly dovetailed, and it's a lot of knowing what the other guy is doing to make sure it's a smooth operation. And
yes, and I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to because so many hedge funds operate in so many different ways. But I think definitely on that sort of the overall structure of it, from the portfolio manager down to the marketing, you're all in contact with each other very regularly. And in fact, I think ours was more so in that everyone was in on the marketing emails, so we could see what was happening. Yeah. Some places, what they'll do is they'll isolate the portfolio management teams, but from that point, you still have that workflow, that communication flow.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what's, you talked about fund of funds, which is a very interesting concept. And you talked about hedge funds. I mean, how are they different from mutual funds, or what is a fund of funds? I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. So a fund of funds can have mutual funds. It can have all sorts of different funds. But basically what's happened is somebody has decided they want varying exposures. They want to give their money to somebody who can pick pickers. So if you think of the fund or the fund manager, the hedge fund manager, as someone who can pick the right trade to do, there are other people who can claim to pick the pickers. They'll do all the in-depth research. They'll make sure that the company is correct, that the fund itself has got the right strategy, and then they'll balance that with the whole fund itself, with the portfolio. So what they might say is, they might say 50%, I want a 50% equity exposure, which would be stocks and shares, and then I want to balance it out amongst some of the other stuff, and then give me 10% of the risk. I want some of the risky sort of sexy stuff that's going to make my portfolio shoot up. And it's the fund of fund that will look after all of that and kind of take that. In some senses, they're dying out a little bit because platforms like Hargreaves Lansdown make it very easy to pick all of that sort of stuff, and you're less likely to go out there. But there are still some, like I know Abbey Capital, quite a big one, who can go out there to get a decent return.
Okay, so it sounds really interesting. I mean, you've told us quite a bit. I'm just going to look in the chat, and so I have some questions coming up. So somebody's asked, Luca's asked, what was the initial career path in which you suggested which would be a good starting block to becoming a trader? So we've got some questions from the audience. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so there are two main types of trading, which is there are risk-taking traders and there are non-risk-taking traders, and it's much easier to get into the non-risk-taking world. So you become what's called an execution trader, and in fact, there are lots of graduate programs and there'll be internships and things like that will be a good route in for hedge funds themselves. The risk-taking trader is becoming more difficult to get into because that space is, to start with, it's quite crowded out. It's sort of stuck with the big banks. So if you think of Goldman Sachs, of market makers, but a lot of what they used to do is becoming automated as well. And so if you're kind of thinking of that big career where people are making millions of pounds in a year bonus, I think that's dying away. I mean, they're still making very good money, very nice money. It's certainly not a career to be sniffed at. But I think if that's the world you're looking at, I think it's probably more on the research side later down in your career when you go on to working for a hedge fund or something like that, where you can make that money.
Okay, very good. So thinking of, so what are the routes to getting into these financial careers? I mean, you did it after master's in finance, and you suggested that people could do it in undergraduate degrees. So could you elaborate a little bit? Or, I think you've hinted at it. You've talked about PhDs and masters and undergraduates. So if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. So that there are loads. I mean, the world of finance has many, many different routes in. The most commonly trod path is to get an internship in a summer and then to go after your summer to get the graduate job afterwards. I think that's if you're looking to go to one of the bulge bracket banks. Those, I think, your Goldman Sachs's, your JP Morgan's, people like that. I think that's quite straightforward. But not to worry if you don't. I didn't have an internship anywhere. You can go out, you can get internships through what's called the I-2020 scheme. That's a great scheme to go out and sort of get exposure to some of these places. The way that I did it, which I would recommend as well, is to use recruiters. Recruiters, right, especially in the hedge fund world, are very highly used because people don't want to worry about hiring an HR function to manage this. They want to be able to say to someone, this is the kind of person I'm looking for, this is the function I need, go find me that. And they'll pay a cut of your salary. I mean, you won't see that because it's not you that's taking the cut, it's the business. And they'll get people in. And so there are some great recruitment companies, specifically for operations, for trading, for things like that. They're great resources to talk to. And they'll also look over your CV and tell you what they think as well, which is good. But don't be dissuaded if they say no. And that thing, you need XYZ programming languages and you need this many PhDs and stuff. Don't worry about that. Just go to a different recruiter. You'll be fine.
I think that is what I remember about your attitude, James, which is very refreshing, that just never give up, just go on. So just to take you back, you said something about I-20, which I didn't know about. So can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's I-2020. It's an investment scheme. Well, it's an internship scheme for people who want to get into investment, and it's pegged as for people who wouldn't normally find a way into finance. But I wouldn't really. It's not really quite that anymore. So essentially, a load of asset managers, which are think fund managers, as we've just been discussing, banks and things like that. What they'll do is they'll take people on for a year's internship, and you'll get put into a function within one of these places. And after the year, you've either got a year's experience that you can use to leverage to go somewhere else or go back to university, or they'll keep you on. We actually used to use Investment 2020 scheme, or the Investment 2020 scheme, for our legal and risk team. And also some of our computer science people were on that as well. So it's a very broad range, and you do get given a lot of work that you can kind of sink your teeth into. You are very much a member of the team.
Okay. So that's something which even undergraduates can explore if they want to, or postgraduates can do so if they're thinking about what to do at the end of the post-graduation. They can certainly explore, and that they would find some material about it on the net. And then you recommended one could always use recruitment agencies as well. So that's very useful to know. I think that's brilliant. So tell us a little bit about how you started your thing, and when did you actually get yourself a job? Because one of the questions I'm getting here is, how long did it take you? And this is Gabrielle saying, how long did it take you for you to find a job after finishing your MSc?
It took a few months. It takes a while. It's not something that happens overnight. I remember I think I would take my CV. I'd take a stack of CVs. Obviously, you can't do this anymore, but I'd take a stack of CVs down to the City of London, and I'd sort of walk around the buildings, and I'd look to see if they had a Capital Partners or an LLP or something on there, and I'd sort of try and hand my CV out to the receptionist, which they weren't always too willing to take it. But I think nowadays, the best tactic I've heard of is to pick an area that you're interested in, reach out to some people on LinkedIn, and don't ask for a job. Just ask for a coffee or a 5-minute Zoom or a 5-minute chat to just talk about something. How do I get into this role? And if they know of something, they'll help. And if they don't know of something, then it's fine. They'll talk to you. They'll give you some great advice, and you just keep going around like that, trying to talk to them. You then look online, as well, and just put out as many feelers as you can. And I mean that will take a few months, but don't be disheartened if it doesn't happen straight away. These things do take time.
So you can start this while you're doing your degree, a master's degree?
Yeah, I'd recommend that. I think that's actually the mistake I made, because I did it around about the end of my dissertation. I think I was doing my dissertation as I was doing it, and that got a little bit heavy actually, because I remember some of these places, they will ask for a lot of information. So they'll be, give us one news article, or talk about a news article that's like shows your interest in finance, or like that's the thing that got you interested in finance. And you'd have to spend time poring over news articles, things like that, trying to find the right one. And all of that within your dissertation can be quite difficult. So I'd say if you can do it beforehand, do it as early as possible. If not, don't worry. I mean, still do it as early as possible, but just sort of be aware to balance it.
So one of the questions we've got is from Luca again. He says, I had previously engaged with a member of the JP Morgan team, and they asked about front office positions. They mentioned that a master's was paramount because of the huge number of people who are coming in internationally. So is that so, Jamie? Is the competition got a little bit stiffer?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, it's different. Having a master's is always going to be useful, because these people, especially at places like JP Morgan, they will have not checkbox exercises, but they'll want to know. It's a great way to show that you're interested beyond the undergraduate degree as well, and it's more chance for you to build up on your CV and stuff. But it isn't everything. You do need to have a balanced record on your CV. You do make sure that you're doing lots of extracurriculars. Do make sure that you're whatever you have on your CV, do make sure that when you go in there, you can talk about it like enthusiastically. So when they ask you about your master's, you can say, yes, I did it because I'm really interested. Here's X, Y, Z that I did. this is what I really enjoy.
Okay. So now is the time of truth. Did you enjoy the time with us, Jamie?
I
And what
loved
did
it.
Lincoln?
Loved it.
So really, I think it's nice to know that. So seriously, what did you feel about what Lincoln gave you, which allowed you to find your confidence? I'm not just talking about finance, but you had certain confidence and certain belief in yourself. Was it the degree? Was it the undergraduate? Was it the postgraduate? Was it the people around you? What was it?
I think it's a, and this is a bit of a cop out. It was a mixture of everything, really. I made some really great friends that I'm still in touch with today, both on and off the course. That always helps to build confidence because you feel like it's more at home. I think the masters, for me, I look back on as one of the biggest growth phases that I had in terms of in 1 year. I didn't think that I would grow as much as I did, and I don't think I would have got my job if it wasn't for the masters, because I was able to go into that interview and talk confidently, not just about the subjects itself, but I could talk enthusiastically about the world of finance. And that's just something that the masters gave me. I can't really point it to one place, but I'm going to say it's definitely the faculty that helped.
Thank you. That sounds very good. I did teach you in your undergraduate as well, I think. So it was very nice to sort of look back on that time and see you blossom into this very confident, very happy person. And I think I know you in your master's degree had a very small set of people. It wasn't overly huge in Lincoln, and I think that allowed us to, be with you on a one-to-one basis. I don't know what I think I've taught in bigger institutions, and there are 300 people. You can't get to know your students, but I think we knew you and you knew us pretty well. You felt, I think, hopefully, you felt free enough to talk to us anytime, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was, again, you guys were always, and this was across all of the lectures actually. Everyone, you were all really super accessible, and that really does help, especially if you have a question and you're kind of interested in something and you want to ask the feedback is right there straight away, and that's really important for that development.
Right. So, okay, we have some more questions coming in, and I'm just thinking, what is the look at the time? It's 5 coming up to 5:30. So now we've got some very particular questions coming in, and things about. Okay, let me see. As some individuals may have some issues with regards to fees associated with the masters, I've been recommended to do CFA. So now, do you think the masters help you with the CFA, or you can do the CFA without it? I know you can do the CFA without it, but what do you think the masters gives you as an edge towards CFA?
It's difficult to say. I think what the masters gives you is a deeper understanding of what you're doing. Okay, so the CFA is broad, and one of the reasons why it's so prestigious is because they will drop 60% of you. They'll say, here's the part, like we're grading on a bell curve. Anyone in the bottom 60%, you're out. And so what it
Okay.
can show people is that you're willing to slog it out, and that you have this baseline sort of understanding, and you've passed it to a decent level. But I think with the masters, you can get to a very similar understanding, and you have, I think, more chance to explore what you're interested in. You're not kind of stuck on an ethics chapter for the next 3 years,
Yeah.
because you have to do ethics in every single one. You're able to cover that in probably half a term, and then you're able to look into actually what you do, like if it's portfolio management, if it's sort of bond pricing, things like that. You're able to go deep. And I actually think the most valuable thing that I got from the masters was the dissertation, in terms of
Yeah.
what I learned. It was sitting down and slogging away at an Excel spreadsheet, trying to find what I could, get it into the right format, and then run these models. And that's actually more realistic to what you'd be doing on a day-to-day basis. You'd be pulling data in, you'd be fixing it, you'd be spending a lot of time cleaning it, and then you'd finally run your model, and then you got to sit down and say, right, what have I got here? And the
Yeah.
opportunity to openly define that question into something that you're interested in, I think, gives the masters an edge, in my opinion. But there's no reason why you can't do both. If you, especially, so it's Luca, isn't it? So if you're going down for that front office sort of big banking route, the masters will help you get you in the door, because you won't get into a graduate position if you are going for the CFA. But you can get your foot in the door with the masters and then use the CFA to, try and work up that career ladder, or if it's just something that you're interested in.
Okay, that sounds good. I am just trying to see if I'm missing some. So there's a little bit about the professional qualifications, and I think in a way you've answered it, because somebody's asking, do you know about professional qualifications like ACCA, CFA, and ACA help your improvement chances? So, I mean, I guess in a way they're saying that these professional things count a lot, and masters also counts. So uh, maybe you've already answered it, but go ahead, because I think since somebody asked it, it's worth a.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, any professional qualification is fantastic and great. I think ACCA and ACA, you don't want to be going under that yourself. You want to try and find a training contract. So to the point that you're getting to the training contract to become an accountant, you've got to try and get the best qualifications you can to get into there. And if that's, if you're there now, then you might want to go ahead and just go into one of those contracts now. But if not, if you want to do the masters to get there as well, you can do that. With the CFA, you can register for the CFA beforehand, as in like before you can finish your degree. You don't need an employer to register you. So I think it's about £800, but which is no small sum. But what it can do is it can signal to employers, especially on the research side, that you're interested in that career path. And so signing up to the CFA, I think, is the only one of those, if you're going down the research route, that I would recommend. Otherwise, ACCA, ACA, look for a training contract somewhere.
Yeah. And I think, I know the Masters in Finance, we cover broad topics which are related to the CFA. So if you've done the Masters in Finance, you should have no trouble passing the CFA. There are some modules which we don't do in class, which is like the microeconomics, but we're always willing to help people. And I think majority of the modules map to the CFA route anyway. So, there is some, and like you said, the master's degree, I think, puts you on an edge because you have a dissertation, which is what you mentioned, which is your own piece of work. It's not something like a written exam. It's your work and your confidence which has gone on into building that work. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
I hope I'm putting that properly. Yeah. Yeah, no, excellent. So Jamie, that sounds really good. What else did you enjoy in Lincoln? I mean, what did you do in your master's? You obviously slogged a lot, and you made friends. Did you play sport?
Yeah, lots of sport. Any chance I got. So yeah, it'd be either five-a-side or rugby whenever the chance sort of came along to go and do sport. Just take it, or any kind of extracurricular. That's my advice.
So you got time to indulge in things which you liked.
Yeah, and I think that's important for your career throughout, is to make time for that, because when I first started at Cantab, I had a year where I just dedicated myself to the job. I put all other sides of the stuff on hold, and you find yourself sort of banging your head against the wall a little bit, and then sign up back to the local rugby club. It just sort of, if you can find time where you can just leave whatever's at work at the door, you can spend an hour, 2 hours running around just focusing on that. It really does help you get that breath of fresh air and come back to the desk a human.
Yeah, no, I think what you're saying is very right, because otherwise you'll achieve burnout in whatever you do. And but yeah, I think having a degree in Lincoln, because it's a small place, you don't have to spend time traveling. You live there. It's an easy commute into class. You're not living miles away. That sort of gives you the time to do things which you like, as opposed to a big city where you have to travel in and join class or something like that. So I think personally that I think Lincoln is a very student-friendly place, and I know a lot of people who after undergraduate stay on in Lincoln because they like it. And was that your thought?
Yeah, no, I had a really great undergraduate experience. Really enjoyed it, and by that point, I'd become settled in the kind of extracurriculars and all that sort of stuff that the Lincoln throw your way. I also, I mean, the reason for staying on to do the masters is that I quite like that I now knew a lot of the people teaching on the course. So for me, it was a little bit easier to make that adjustment from undergraduate to postgraduate study because the surroundings were familiar, the faces were familiar, and then you kind of just focus on going into that and trying to grow yourself.
Yeah. So can I ask what modules you enjoyed in masters?
So I liked, I think it was portfolio analysis, which was always great fun.
It's a toughie. It's a
Pardon?
tough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Oh, it's tough, but it's great because I think that gives you the kind of, when you go into mean variance theory and all that, like it's still there in my head, sort of the efficient frontier, all that kind of stuff. And it's so important to when going out into the real world, because those theories are still held as like relevant, important theories in professional practice. And though you might not be going into, the level and depth that all these proprietary investment teams are going into, you kind of can understand a rough level. And so that was really helpful. Bond pricing Gita was really useful for me because I'm going to manage the treasury portfolio. So understanding how bonds work, how they price, things like that was super helpful.
That's good because that was my module, and I think I enjoyed teaching it. But I know I've taught portfolio before, but I know somebody else taught you, and usually students find it tough because. But I think you're right in a way. What you study at undergraduate level, though you've heard things like mean and variance, but they're just concepts at undergraduate level. And then when you get into portfolio price and you deal with real life data, then that kind of cements it in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it really does. And I think we had, I don't know if Milan is still there, but in the sort of the thing that was macroeconomics, one of them, he would go through everything with real world data on Stata, and it's just very different when you see it there, and you kind of the level that was expected for you to get into the classroom to understand what they were talking about it was quite useful to sort of see the real world examples and take it further.
So Milan has now gone back to China or Hong Kong, but we have other people who are teaching international microeconomics. And yes, because like you mentioned at the start of your talk, the economic side also in which finance operates becomes very important to know. So exchange rate theory and something. So we've kind of kept that module going. And I think the thing we have another degree called investment banking, but that is very strictly tailored to banking. Whereas the master's in finance is more general and gives you a foothold in various aspects. Jamie, did you do things like the student fund?
So the student fund came a year after that after I graduated. But I mean, that sounded like a great opportunity and exactly what I think can kind of help elevate people to getting some of the, getting in front of people as well. Because again, that's probably one of the hardest things that can feel like when you're looking for a job is just to find the right person in the right place to look at your CV. And then bearing in mind when someone, we've done it in my last role, you'd look over CVs. You're not going to give someone more than 2 minutes of a CV look over. And so you're kind of looking for something to jump out. And I do think something like the Lincoln Fund does help.
Yeah, the Lincoln Student Managed Fund was started by Howe, and I think now we have over 100 students on it. So, it's been, it's been a huge success. And I believe there are not many universities in the country which do it. So, and that gives people, again, a chance to say that we've actually dealt with real life trading before you're hired to take on, so that's something which is there. So after all this, James, why have you decided to pack up and go off to Oxford? Because Jamie is off, if people are listening in, James has had this career from 2016, it's now 2021. And the question from Chow is, you had a lot of potential and you were promoted in finance. So why did you sign up for an MBA from Oxford now? Are you missing the university side of things?
I like learning is the first one. I think it's sort of, it's nice. It's nice to be in those structured environments. To be honest, I was thinking about doing an MBA from, at one point there were 2 people in front of me for a promotion, So you're kind of sat there and thinking, how do I get to that next level? And the MBA is different to a master's in finance, because it's much more of a holistic sort of approach. You cover wider areas, so you're going into marketing and organizational behavior, and I like the academic approach to all of that. And I kind of thought that was my way to step up and move on in that kind of industry. And then as I got the promotion, I still felt like that was what I was missing a little bit. These aren't
Okay.
lessons that you can use in the next 3 to 5 years. These are lessons that will stick with you for the next 20 to 30. And I want to run my own company one day. And that's exactly the sort of the route that I want to go down. I think those will be some lessons that I can take on.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct. So you moved from a specialist degree to a more generalist degree. Do you think it should be the other way around?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. So yeah, I think you can do the sort of the more generalist route and then kind of find your focus, if that makes sense. But I think I kind of knew that I liked finance, so I was happy to go down the specialist route first. And then
Yeah,
what's great is that, I mean, the great thing about finance is it touches everywhere, right? It doesn't matter what the company is doing, it still needs to understand its
yeah.
finances. And so the MBA is going to kind of hopefully broaden me out into different areas, and maybe I can transition into something like tech or something like that at a more kind of management level.
Yeah, no, amazing. It's very good. I think MBAs are very useful after a certain stint in your career, because if you do a lot of generalist stuff when you're, straight after, you don't get a chance to actually use specialization to learn something particularly. But that's my view. And I think it gives you a very overarching thing after 4 or 5 years of work life to learn the wider skill set. So fantastic. I'm just going to have a quick look to see if I've missed any questions. Um, okay, there's quite a few coming up. Okay. And so basically, again, questions like, what do you think? There was one which I had noted down earlier. Um, what makes you think that any tips which you can give to people, which has also come up in one of these questions. What tips can you give to people to apply for jobs? What are the 4 or 5 things they can take away when you're a young person starting off? What is it? Your clothes? Is it your demeanor? Is it your confidence? Is it your CV? Is it your degree? What is it? How do you make that first impression?
I mean, I think about this often again, because we've recruited for. I've been on both sides of the table where you're applying for stuff, and then when you're kind of hiring people in. And I think the thing that overarches everything is passion. You can get over a degree result not going away. I had a 2.2, and I went for jobs that the job I got, they say that you needed a 2.1. You can find ways around that, but the most important thing is that you come across as passionate. And I think that's above everything else. If you can give it your all in that way, then you're not going to have too many problems finding somewhere. I think getting there, think about what it is that you want to do. Like have a really deep sort of internal search. I know it sounds so strange to think, but if there were no barriers, what would you be doing? What would you want to be doing? If it's running a hedge fund, if it's running a finance department, anything, and then just map it from there. Who are the people who hire at this level? So who's hiring graduates as they come in? Can I talk to anyone on LinkedIn? Can I do this? Is my CV right for this role as well? If there are a couple of areas that you're applying, don't forget to tailor it. But yeah, when you get there, big smile on your face. Try and be as confident as possible. It's never easy to do that. Like, you know that, but just be passionate and you'll be all right.
Fantastic, Jamie. That is fantastic. In the world of logics and numbers, passion seems to count a lot. So thank you so much, Jamie. I think we've it's a 5:45, and unless there are more questions, we should start winding this up. And thank you for a very nice time here. I don't know if anybody wants to post any more questions, but okay, there's a couple of more coming in. Okay, there are just things about you and where they can contact you. And Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you, James, especially for, I know you're so nice to us. You come back time and time again, and you help us, you know, tell us what we did right and what we, so it's very nice to see you, and very nice to see you. And I wish you all the luck in your future career at your Oxford University. I'm sure we'll have you back again. But meantime,
I was just
yeah, go
saying thank
ahead.
you very much. Thank you very much for having me back. It's always a
Yeah,
pleasure.
yeah. Take care, Jamie, and bye bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.